Welcome to the Working Writer Podcast with Tia Levings. Today's episode is on screenwriting and storytelling with Alycia Ripley. I am so excited to share Alycia with you. She is the talented Miss Ripley on Instagram, and that's where we originally connected over PR, blogging, storytelling, and she's one of those people that as you get to know her, it's like a new layer and a new layer and a new layer. She's a Rubik's Cube. She's fantastic. This conversation, I could have gone longer. I recorded it on a day back in the winter when I had a bunch of interviews stacked. And so I actually had to stick to the clock. And it was kind of sorry because we were just going on such a good roll. We covered writing contests. She's got tons of screenwriting tips and like real world experience, the time it takes to mature a career. We talk a lot about working writer work ethic and how much work it takes to actually make a go at this. She has a really unique background and story that I'm not going to spoil for you, but luck obviously plays a role. Let's see. It was kind of cool editing this. Today is September 2021. I recorded this back in December of 2020, and in that time, the world's gone through a lot of changes. She and I have both through a lot of changes. She has actually already filmed and directed her first movie and is at work on her second. She has a Patreon. She's fundraising for the production costs of the second film. It was just really cool to see the contrast in that amount of time, how much work she's gotten done. And little things like I'm not doing those ebooks for every episode anymore, and I haven't rolled them out on the schedule that I was planning, but I took a full-time gig, and so this is a little time capsule because life was different back when I recorded it. Super proud of Alycia and can't wait to see. I love supporting her work. I cannot wait to see her movie Watercolors. The next one she's got going, it's like a murder thriller, maybe comedy about a wedding. You'd have to check it out on her Instagram profile to get more information. Let's see here. Oh, and a couple times she flips the script and interviews me. So there's stuff in here about my book and my projects. I learned a lot through this conversation, and I know that you will too. So no more chit chat at the beginning. I'm just gonna get into it. This school. Thank you for saying yes to it. And
Oh, I'm excited. I was really excited. I love your Instagram. I tell people all the time, I complain about the internet at times, or I should say I complain about cell phones
mhm.
more specifically, because I don't know about everyone, but I feel half the time like I'm tied to it. And like my mom, who's obviously much older, she will just leave hers like in another room for hours and doesn't
Wow.
even think about it. And with me, especially with working from home and someone who always, unless I'm filming or unless I'm doing an event or something, I'm always home.
Mhm.
But I just feel like these phones, it's like you feel like you have to text people back immediately or life will end.
Mhm.
And I'm old enough where I remember when that was not the case. Like
Right. Me
I was
too.
a 90s, I graduated high school in 1996, and I think one girl in the school had a cell phone because her father dealt with cell phones and it looked like a massive
The
thing.
big
And
brick with the big
yeah, huge.
antenna.
It's exactly. And like if there was a line at the payphone or if you needed to call home for something, she'd let you use this phone. And the idea now that we have them, and I feel sometimes like I can't disconnect,
Right.
that can be mentally stressful. But I love it for um ironically connecting to people that I didn't know. Like I've
Mhm.
made quality friends on Instagram, which people don't really understand if they don't use it. But I said, I've met so many lovely like ladies in my field
Mhm.
or an adjacent field. And pre-COVID, I was able to meet up with some of these people in Toronto. It's wonderful. And it is really funny how you can connect to people who are like-minded, who are in the same industry, or are just great people, men or women, but I've met a lot of women that I would have loved to have been friends with, but I would never have known
Mhm.
except for Instagram because you're not in the same place, or you
Exactly.
don't work in the same place. So yeah, this was so great. So I love to follow what you're doing, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I tried to think in my head like to prepare things, but I was just like, we'll just flow. It'll be like a
Yeah.
conversation.
I know. I should probably send like a list of questions or something, but I'm like, I just want to talk. I just want to talk shop. And, that's the kind of thing. I'm the same feeling about Instagram. It's like there's genuine engagement there, and
Hmm.
my world is bigger. I can't imagine getting through 2020 without it.
I
Um,
know.
I don't like feeling, I'm the same way with my phone. I would love to leave the room and walk away from it. Or these people that say they're leaving social media. And I'm like, that's my only social life right now. I wouldn't.
I know. I know. No, it is. It's so nice because even when things were shut down, I could still talk to everybody like on here. And it was also creative too, because for me, and so much of the writing that like I do, I've always been a little strange. I've always known exactly what I wanted to do, which was writing film and TV, writing books, storytelling, and I wanted to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, however this could work out. Because the industry is very difficult to predict. But one of the things that was hard for me was I was both. I was both very visual and I was both and very verbal and into the language. So combining that and finding a way to do that took time. And honestly, it took me exceptionally long. I was published at 15 um, in a very freak chain of events that was a contest. And I usually, I just wrote for a guest blog on this. I try to tell people when it comes to contests, don't get overly invested in the concept of winning them because there's an even more influential outcome that can come from a contest. Because what happens with these contests most of the time, there's like 20 restrictions. So they'll give you prompts, they give you all these things. It's usually not like free flow, like send us something you wrote. You also find out about these contests at different times. Like I submitted to something recently and I won something. I won like $50. It's great. But there was like I learned about it 2 weeks in advance, maybe not even, and it was they gave you like 50 paragraphs that including dialogue. So it ended up being very restrictive, and you had to tell this whole story. And there were a bunch of winners, which was nice, but they've all these restrictions, and on top of it, they're getting thousands of applicants.
Yeah.
So when I hear writers, like I've been doing this a long time, literally, I like that your title is the working writer because I've literally been a working writer my whole life. I never had any other job besides acting. So everything was entertainment based. I can honestly say with these contests, people and writers tend to be kind of insecure anyway. So these can be a bad thing because people put all this energy into sending in to something they might have just heard about 2 days before. And then when they don't win something, it's like they feel it wasn't good enough. So I went on this guest blog and I was talking about the best way to think about contests is not about am I going to win a financial prize, because usually it tops out at like $1,000, which is great, but it's not like you're going to win like a lifetime,
Mhm.
subscription here.
Right.
The best thing I think comes from them is they give you a deadline. So especially for people that have a little bit harder of a time focusing or getting something finished, if they see the deadline is in 2 weeks, they work and then they have a piece. They can send it in. Maybe they win, maybe they don't. But the best part of it is now you have a really good piece and you can keep finessing it, because what ends up happening is it's like work begets work. You start sending in, and all of a sudden now someone will contact you. Hey, do you have something in the vein of A, B, and C? Well, yeah, I do, because I sent in for that contest. So the contest itself, I tell writers, don't get hung up on winning. Get hung up on the fact that now you have self-imposed deadlines and you're going to keep completing work. So that's always been important to me because I've worked for such a long time, but I started out winning this very unusual contest that an English teacher had sent in on my behalf. And the reason I think I won was you were supposed to be 18. I was 15, and they had written a letter on my behalf saying she's old for her age, please consider it. And for some reason, it won, and it won like a byline. So from that point on, how I started was that English teacher. Again, I'm dating myself, but that's fine.
It is
I
fine.
it's like people need information and they need to understand the context of when you grew up, because
Yeah,
things are
because
very
it
different.
matters. It
It
really
oh
matters.
very
Yeah,
very
yeah,
much
completely.
very
Yeah.
much matters. So I grew up in the time frame of the 90s. So I graduated in 96. I won that contest in 94. And we had a couple teachers. I went to a very progressive high school. It was all girls. A couple of these teachers were writers in their own right, and sort of notable personalities, or they were married to notable personalities. So they had some pull. And when they sent this thing in and I won, they knew how serious that I took this. I was one of those kids that always wanted to be a writer and an actor. So they felt that getting bylines would help, because if I wanted to go to grad school, doing stuff young would help. So what ended up happening, this is kind of a weird way to success, but in the 90s, magazines were paying for fiction, like they were paying for stories. I don't even, the amount of print magazines that are even like out now have decreased so much. But back in the day, men's magazines, believe it or not, the cheesier ones wanted fiction.
Mhm.
So I was sitting in this English office with women that were like 70 years old, and they would say, so there's this third-rate penthouse and they want something in a crime vein, do you think you could do that? So I said, yeah, of course. So I wasn't sitting there studying the magazines. I don't even know if I ever saw them, but they'd give me the prompt and they would pay me. So if you were 15, 16 and your friends are working at Dairy Queen and you're getting paid to create stories and they put them in these magazines, I literally never knew anything else. And I knew writing wasn't easy because it takes a certain mind and it took focus. But at the same time, I never saw it as like glamorous like some people do. Like some
Mhm.
people are like, oh, you have a book. Yeah, but it's literal work, and it's putting one foot in front of the other, like really with anything else. So my way to this was in the 90s, sending into print magazines that really liked what I did. It was very it's also, my work is not really girly in a lot of ways. It's very for a while when I would submit and I didn't have my name on it, people thought I was a male author, or male writer. So because they tend to have a lot of action, they tend to be very kind of, I don't want to say plot heavy. They're definitely character heavy, but plot meaning like there's a lot going on, like there's a hook, and that,
Mhm.
from what I hear, tends to be more male. So that's how I started, and I've been doing it a long time. Then I went to grad school for it. So to me, with Instagram, just bringing it back to that, with the pandemic, you know, I can only work, like, production is down. So any of the projects, I was in one film that we were able to film, and it was such a nightmare in terms of COVID. Like, I'm thrilled to be in the movie, thrilled to have the part that I have, but the 2 times a week COVID tests, and
Oh my God.
you feel very nervous being around people.
Right.
um so the industry now is slow, and so Instagram gives me such a way to keep up my skills with, like, I take a lot of time with the captions, and
Mhm.
I tell people that's a creative outlet for you as well, because a lot of people notice that stuff, the pictures and the caption together. And that actually caught the eye of people that hired me to do client work, like work for them, or to take over their Instagram, or try to grow some engagement. So I think that there's a lot to be said, for that, social media in particular, because
Mhm.
you're not pulled into the nonsense that Facebook has with, like, who's screaming about something political, or who's, family drama that somebody has on there. Like, it's so much more, you can find out more about what people are about and what they like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I like
So
it.
that's exciting. I am like right there with you on contests, and it's so funny you said that because I have a topic idea that I wants to focus on contests, but I'm like, where am I going to find another contest, like a person passionate about it? And you just did it, so it's really cool.
They're good. They really
I
are.
love
They're
them.
fun. It's just you have to do it staying a little bit like away, because I've seen so many talented writers get so, like, defeated if they didn't win something. And I said, you got to go back. Like, first of all, always read, especially if you want to apply to one of their contests later.
Hmm.
Go back and read, like, the top two that won,
Right.
because you will find out certain online magazines or journals have, like, kind of an agenda in terms of, like, what they want to promote. um and they're reading thousands of things, but like sometimes, like, not even trying to be mean, I'll go and read some of the first place ones and I'm like, I've never been so bored in my
Mhm.
life. Like, they're very boring, and like someone described a
We're
stalk
not
of
going to
wheat for
name
3 pages.
contest names, but I have one in mind as you're speaking.
You know, like, we've all seen this, and it's kind of like, you
Mm,
know, you described a chair for 2 pages. Okay. But I was always taught, keep the dialogue really snappy, keep it fresh, keep it moving.
mhm.
You know, keep going, have beautiful descriptions, but keep going. And sometimes I read these and I'm like, geez. So getting caught up in, I try to tell writers of any type, don't get caught up in this this idea that I actually call it bride mentality, where some women get caught up in rather than being really in love or really being a great fit or thinking down the road, are we always going to be good? They're caught up in the I was picked mentality. Like yeah, he's great, but like he picked me and now I have a ring and now I have all these pictures, and that can lead to problems. And the same thing with writers. You get,
Mhm.
it's like, oh, I want to be validated and I want to be picked, and it's like you have to be so bullet tight as an art as a writer that your self worth is not
Mhm.
tied up in these contests. Same thing where when, you know, I'll write things with whether it's screenwriting or books, you have to be willing to get up there and be like, and really fight for what you need to stay in there, and understand that not everyone you're working with is that smart. Sorry to say,
Right.
they're just not. So you have to really, I think, keep a very tight vest of believing in yourself, believing in what you're doing,
Mhm.
and not handing over your power. And I think that's where contests can set a lot of really good writers completely astray. If you think of them like, yes, I
Oh
finished
yeah.
it, it's good,
If
send it in.
that like if you don't have thick skin, and I don't know, my whole MO in doing them in the first place was to break out of my ruts. I needed
Mm-hmm.
uh to shake it up a little bit, and try other things. And I was really working on craft at the time. I was when I first got started into it, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is so exciting. Every single time I enter one, I can do something different." And so my whole like all I want out of it is the experience. I want to tighten my word count, work in those parameters. I've won a couple, but I'm also like, well, that's nice because it's nice once extra money comes in, always.
Right.
However, I'm gonna do it anyway because
Right.
I'm like love them. My favorite one is Screencraft's cinematic short story contest, and their judges give you feedback. So you're getting a read and you're getting like really detailed feedback
That's
on what's wrong
nice.
with your story. And I'm like, I will do that every year, every single year. And then, if you don't win, you can reuse that piece in something else. It's not like it's wasted
Mm-hmm.
time. So
Exactly.
it's that actually was the pivot point for me, I think, a few years ago when I was like, I really, really want this. I wanted it, but I was afraid to say that out loud and like really do it, you know?
Yeah.
And contests help me just, I don't know, just tighten it all up and
Oh
get
yeah.
there.
If it
Yeah.
sounds like you're using it for the right, definitely the right reason, and it's great to get feedback on things for sure.
Hmm.
And that's so rare because usually I don't hear anything
Oh
from
yeah.
these people. Now, how did you start writing? Have you always been a writer?
Oh yeah. I think we've pretty much tracked on the same line so far. I'm like, yep, yep, yep. Like I can't not write. I have always written. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I know it's hard work and I like that it's hard work. Um, I think the only thing that really gets me down is when I like come against repeated gatekeepers and trying to break in and trying to get a foothold, but it's like the kind of thing I'm going to do anyway. And
Yeah.
my whole passion has been like, okay, I have to turn a buck doing this because I literally am not happy unless I'm doing this. So I do corporate gigs too because that's nice stability, but
Mm-hmm. You write
definitely.
for them? Like you do writing for businesses?
Yeah, yeah. I just spent a year with one corporate company, and it was fantastic. I mean, contracting is good money.
Mm-hmm.
Copywriting is good practice. It tightens up your craft no matter what you're doing. Um, but I really don't want another 40-hour a week gig.
Mm-hmm.
That's my there's tension there. There's some definite inner conflict. But anyway, that contract ended in the beginning of November, and I had this podcast idea in the background, And I was like, well, I'm probably not going to find another major gig at the end of the year on 2020. Everybody's waiting to like decide
Yeah.
what they're going to do. So I might as well pour everything into this. And so, yeah, I'm recording, like, this isn't probably going to air till summer. And I'm like, just get everything recorded right now,
Hmm.
and get it all, because there's a ton of work in podcasting. Oh my God, there is so much
Yeah.
peripheral writing that has to happen. And I decided to do an ebook with every episode. So
Oh, great.
that's a lot of work for each one. But it's also like my path to monetization, I guess, because I didn't want
Hmm.
to, you can't even make them ad heavy, even, when you're starting,
Yeah.
it's not possible. But the book parallel gives me an opportunity to like go deeper into each topic, address writers' problems, and then grow it like a different audience. There will be people who
Hmm.
only want that don't have time to listen to podcasts. So, it's kind of a
Yeah.
my what's the word? I almost lost my word. Like I have this I cannot find my word. It's an inner conviction of like my inner mission, make sure everything can do multitask basically. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, repurposing and stuff is the gist. And I'm sure the word will pop into my head at some later hour.
Is it difficult to learn how to podcast? Like, was that a journey in itself, or is it?
Uh, so I was familiar behind the camera with the editing and everything. I had done that for a client. And I had a job where I worked on the side. Like I knew at least what the scope was in a
Mm,
previous position. I had been involved in the scope of it. So the real hard part was I'm introverted and I'm doing this on video and audio. I definitely prefer the audio production. Um, but why not double dip on YouTube? Like there's people
yeah.
that's all they do. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to be doing it, I
Yes.
might as well do it all. Yeah, so that's just pretty much been the learning curve is, the same self-conscious stuff that everybody who's going to get in front of a camera and a microphone is going to have to face is
Yeah.
this
What
stuff.
was your background? Because you were saying you did like editing and things for a client. What was your background to learn how to do all that stuff?
So I come from makers and I didn't go to college. I had my babies really young. I come like if you've seen me on Instagram, I
Hmm.
talk about fundamentalism and religious trauma for a
Yeah.
reason because I basically lived the Handmaid's Tale for 14 years.
That's so
So
crazy.
it is crazy. And I got myself out. What you doing with the scissors? That's the second time
Oh,
I've seen that.
I had a little tweeze. It's a little tweezer in my hand.
Oh,
Sometimes,
it's
like
like,
when
is
I'm
she
relaxed.
stabbing?
No, I sometimes relax. It sounds so crazy. I'm not actually tweezing anything, but like I just
Okay.
keep it there. You know how you have little things that, like some people chew gum. I just
Yeah.
always like have it there. But you're right. It
It
looks
looks
like
like you're
scissors.
like
I
you're
should have a
gonna
pen.
That's
Your
funny.
your background actually is really really interesting because you as a person, like I think I learned that about you after we had become Instagram friends. And I
Mhm.
remember going, "Wow, like not what I was expecting." And people's experiences are so they're so cool because they're so different, and I find that on there a lot
Yeah.
because people that you connect to and you have a lot of similarities, but then all of a sudden somebody will have something and it's like, wait a minute, let me read that three more times because
Hmm.
that's not what I was picturing. And
Right.
people are so interesting. That's why I was so excited to know, like, what is her work background, like how did she learn how to do all these different things?
Thank God for the internet, basically, is what happened. So it's all very lucky, blessed, all the things that you can think of, a lot of resourcefulness and resilience and
Mm,
perseverance and being willing to like turn it over and see how this works. And then I can write. And I have found that if you can write and if you can tell a story, you will always have work. There will always be somebody who's listening. So
mm-hmm.
I've learned to trust that. So when we moved, I was in my first marriage. I was in a very fundamentalist close cult, lots of domestic violence, whole thing, world very small. We moved to an even more isolated place where I was completely cut off, except we got the internet. And so I discovered blogging, and that was before Google's algorithm changes. This is when blogging was brand new. You could like do a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
through because I can write, because I can tell stories, because I'm willing to be transparent. Um, I was getting 80,000 hits a day on my blog, and
Oh
that
wow.
people were like, "How are you doing that?" And so then I was like, "Well, I can tell you how." And so then I became a consultant at the same time I was leaving all of that virus, that
Oh,
violence. So, it's then I was in the right place at the right time, and I ended up working for Tony Robbins in one of his companies. Like it's too
that's
crazy of a
great.
story. Which put me into marketing, which put me like, and then I've gone from marketing company, and I've just learned how
Yeah.
to do things, and I can write, and I know I can write. So that's how it happens.
That's when you were saying you could teach people how to blog and get all the hits. Does a lot of that have to do with words that you use? Like, is that a keyword thing, or was it about like what you were writing about?
Well, it was a lifestyle blog about my kids. It was called Living Deliberately. It was before we knew what keywords were. Um, and here was what my real the twist was. I started reviewing Oprah's books. She had just come out with Oprah's Book Club, and I
Oh,
started
okay.
doing reviews of them. And I did the big thing that turned the key was I did a negative review of one of her titles, and the keywords were in the title. And all of a sudden, boom, it was like waterfalls. It was crazy.
Wow.
Now that all went away when Google was like 2008, Panda came out, the Panda algorithm change came out. Everything, like they really like hit blogs if you were doing too much
Hmm.
linking. We started learning what Black Hat was. All that stuff was like evolving as we went. And I stepped out of that
Hmm.
arena because I was raising kids. I've got 5
Yeah.
children. So I was like, I was raising kids. I was recovering from all this trauma, trying to find my feet, lots happening, and the world changed. And then social media took the place of blogging, and it's all evolved,
Hmm.
and I stayed behind the scenes. And in those years I really want to just now focus on my own writing. I finally wrote that memoir. I'm shopping it with agents now. It's called The American Burqa, and it's
That's
not
great.
really timed well for 2020. Nobody wants to read dark. And it's dark, but it's also like the hinge project that unlocks the rest of my future for fiction and other memoirs and other things that I want to do and talk about beyond
Yeah.
religious trauma, because
Oh,
you
nice.
can only do that to a point. Religious trauma gets just gets heavy, like I'm
Oh, yeah.
multifaceted, and I want to be um that's enough about me.
No, but you brought up a really important point in one comment that you said, which was sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time.
Oh yeah.
Because I have lamented that so many times. I mean, I could tell you stories like I have a memoir that's out, came out in 2018, I think. My mother, I call him my stepfather, they weren't married. My mom was with who I call my stepdad for almost 30 years. We were very, very, very close. He's the only dad I really ever had. And he died very suddenly. And I had been book touring at the time for another
Oh.
book. So it was very stressful. It was very sudden. And the book is written in letters to him. It's a very short book, and it's over the course of a year, one or two letters a week, and it kind of shows the progression of grief. Um, like I was in fugue states. I'd go to the grocery store to get like two things, and I'd be there for half an hour, like staring at something.
Mm.
And I didn't really think that this was gonna go anywhere. I was writing it for myself, but my publisher asked, they happened to see it. We were having an in-person, just having in-person meetings is blowing my mind right now. I'm like, wow, there was like 25 people sitting around a table. But they looked at my notebook and I told them about the project, what I was working on, and they thought it was really interesting. And I said, well, who is going to want to read that? And they said, well, first of all, book clubs where there's a lot of discussion and engagement and people can relate, grief therapy groups. And that's exactly what happened. But in that memoir, when I talked to my stepfather in the letters, I had a real, everyone kind of looks at me now and is like, wow, this girl's like taking off. And it's like, yeah, but it was like 20 years of seeds. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was a weird person. I started very young with, like I was telling you about the writing, so people knew my name and I was able to work. But there was a long period of time, like this is the kind of stuff that would happen to me. I was in New York City for 7 years, went to graduate school, for creative writing. So I'm an MFA. Then I went to the Lee Strasberg School for Acting because I wanted to combine them. I started writing plays. I was in some plays in New York, modeling, doing whatever I could do. My first book came out in 2006. And then all of a sudden, if you go to an MFA program, that's like, whoa, everyone's all excited. But the thing about books was everything with me was such an awkward time. And I've bemoaned it for a long time where finally I said, you know what? I try to be spiritual in my way and say everyone's time is everyone's time. And it happens the way it happens. And I had this book come out, but what was going on at that time in 2005, 2006 was it was the big change of prior to that, everything was big publishers and everyone got their deal the same way. You wrote for magazines, you got your name out, you submitted something, or you submitted queries or got an agent, and it was always the same way. Well, all of a sudden, right when this book was going to come out, I remember somebody saying, this book is not going to happen because although it's got a great, exciting plot, the characters are really great, everyone wants Sex in the City stuff right now. Everybody wanted girls in Manhattan drinking and sleeping with different people. And that was what was popular. People didn't think that they were going to want to read a book about, like, it's a relationship, it's at a music magazine, but it goes back and forth in time. And it deals with nuclear physics, granted in a really fun way. Because I have a minor in qualitative nuclear physics, which is
fun.
odd. So it's all like time travel and black holes and all that stuff. So people thought that it was too thinky a book, but the thing is this book is very easy to read, and I thought it would have been an immediate thing. But what happened is the big publishers were starting to change, because that's when Amazon was starting to have people publishing, like self-publishing became this deal. So then there were all these small publishers and indie publishers, and the whole thing started to change. And I was like, well, great. I didn't even know how to make that happen. How do I make this happen? I had been the mentor to a gentleman who had worked at Rolling Stone where I was working. And he had some ins, and he connected me to some people at an indie publisher, which was out of, I believe, Vancouver at that time. So it was a small publisher. I loved it small because it was like 6 people working there, super easy to get stuff done. And then I left New York, I book toured, and I book toured for that book for a year and a half. By the end of it, I didn't even know my own name. I was young, I was about 26 years old, and they didn't really set up the tour. Like they suggested certain places. I came at it from a creative point of view because it was a story with music journalism. So I book toured, I set them up at record stores, and it did very well. But you have to have that kind of personality where I would go into like bars in, like Virginia and say, hey, you're having country western acts. Can I introduce them and write their bio and then have a table? Oh yeah, sure. So I was doing all this crazy stuff. And that book, people still come up to me now and know, I mean, that's like 4 books ago, and people still say, oh, you're the Traveling with an Eggplant Girl. And I really love that story.
I love that title so much.
And it has its own emoji, people send me
Right.
eggplants all the time, but it was a weird situation because it's so hard with the big publishers. And so I didn't go that route, because I remember I had a meeting and they were basically going to offer me almost nothing. You really had to have someone with you that was a lawyer that knew what this meant. And I wanted to be a screenwriter, and I wanted to act, and I wanted to bring my work to the screen. And I knew that only certain publishers allow you to do that yourself. If they own the copyright, you got to be very particular on what exactly they own and what they own in terms of your intellectual property, because you'd be shocked. There's some people that, it's like someone wants to make a deal with you, great, go do it. Then there's other ones where it's like, well, no, we own this, we own that, we own this. And I didn't want to get into that bubble. So the indie publisher handled everything like a traditional one would, but it gave me a lot more flexibility. Well, what happened though with them was I left New York, I book toured, I moved to Hawaii and Los Angeles. So I was in Hawaii for over a year. I was writing out there, acting out there. And then in 2011, right when I was in Los Angeles, my other new book came out, which was a planned trilogy. So it was book one of that. And right before that was going to happen, I got a phone call from the publisher, and they had been purchased. So this is kind of an interesting thing where they were indie, they had their own name, they were in Vancouver, and then all of a sudden Penguin purchased them. And this kind of changed a lot of things because that's a huge publisher. They grandfathered in some of Trafford's authors. And now you're owned by Penguin. But because I had been with the previous company, I retained a lot of the rights that I had under them. But it was, which is good, but it was a very different experience. Now when you're trying to get in touch with them, there's so many people and it takes like kind of twice as long to get certain things done. But then they published the 2 books of the trilogy. I'll have another one coming out. The last one will come out. But I got to Los Angeles in 2008, ready to work on a particular project, like a TV show, and then this movie. I get off the plane. I could not make this up to you. This is my life. I had set up where I was going to live with this very nice girl on 5th Street by the beach. She picks me up from the airport. I'm all ready. I'm like, yes, things are finally happening. I'm in Los Angeles. I get off the plane and she goes, so have you seen the news? And I said, not really, because I've been traveling all day. What's going on? And she's like, so there's a writer's strike that happened today.
Oh, I
So
remember that.
the writer's strike of 2008, the day I landed in Los Angeles to go to work is when it started. And what was crazy was anything that had not been greenlit for production by a certain date could no longer continue. That was both of the projects I was scheduled to be on. And sometimes I tell people to go back and look at the history of Jaws. Jaws is my favorite movie. I have a tattoo. And if you go back, Spielberg talks about this too, because they had a strike really close to that movie's being in production. So you had to really scramble to get things done at a certain time. This was just so nuts. And so I did what I could do. I was a lighting double on some things. That's how I made some money there. And I wrote for some clients. And then my new book came out. So getting that call from Penguin was kind of exciting because everything else was like, everything slowed. And then I was with Penguin, so I had that book and then another book. But the book tours for these things they were very, very exhausting. I really pushed it to the point. I had someone managing me to an extent, but it was really kind of me. They don't really do that now. I think that they used to, but now it's just there's so much product and there's so many people. What also happened circa 2013 was I used to do big events in Barnes & Noble, which was a lot of fun. I should tell writers that there is a difference, if you haven't done it yet. Doing like indie stores or any other kind of venue is different than Barnes & Noble because Barnes & Noble is like an oiled machine. It's Saturdays 12 to 2. Sometimes they'll match you up with someone they think you'd be a good sell with as another author or personality. Other times it's just you. But the problem with it is you have to learn, like what you were talking about with streamlining words. You have to learn how to talk to people that have come to see you in very encapsulated amounts of time, which was hard for me because I was a writer that was more like a musician. Like I made my money from touring. I made my fans and my readers from touring. So the idea that people come in and you have Barnes & Noble people standing there ushering people and you get like 30 seconds, that was really tough. And that changed when I was with Penguin, because then it was a much bigger thing and I was under this bigger umbrella. The indie stores give you so much more time to get to know people. So Barnes & Noble is a whole different animal. I think I've done every book, I've done an event there. But then in 2013, you might remember this, they changed their whole format. Like it's much harder to get unless you're a children's book author, it is much harder to get an event because the physical structure of the store is different. Like now the cafe is half of the store. The children's area extended. Now they've got a big media area. So physically the amount of space is super limited. I used to have so much fun at the events there, but now it's the other thing. Oh, I should mention for anyone listening, the other thing that changed was ebooks. Ebooks changed
Mm-hmm.
everything, because
Yeah.
when my first two books came out, they didn't exist. Um, and so the idea of you'd go to see an author that you really, really liked and they'd sign your book. Now places like Barnes and Noble were like, well, what are we going to do? Half these people have Nooks and Kindles. Meanwhile, Nook was their product.
Mm-hmm.
So they tried to promote that. Well, what are we going to have them sign? So I think that was a bit of a demise too with the events, because with so many people on a keyboard reading, it wasn't the same. So I have had a lot of that about being in the right place at the right time. Some people think that I lucked out so many times over, versus I'm kind of like, really? Because I see it as like, it seemed like everything was going to happen and then it didn't. And then it was
Yeah.
another thing of, oh, it seemed like it was going to happen and it didn't. So you have to be able to say everything works out in its time. Talent will come through, but a lot of it is timing. Like, I have no idea why, I started working for film festivals, met people, and then I did interviews with them and contacted them and said, hey, I have this, can I ask you a question? And navigating the industry with what I'm doing now with the scripts, I didn't even know how to do that 4 years ago. So it's being in the right place at the right time, and it's focusing too on what do you really want to do, and who do you know that is a resource for that particular thing, and how can you keep getting involved in a community that's going to help you. For me, that was film festivals, absolutely, for sure. Sorry, I've been talking like a
No, I
long
love
time.
it. I have so many questions and I'm like, crap, I only have 20 minutes left. But because I'm doing back-to-back interviews today. Otherwise we could go over. And
Look at you. You're
But,
like,
yeah, I'm like,
you're packing them in.
Friday, man. Friday we're recording. Yeah, I am trying to pack them in. It's absolutely.
I prefer to talk a lot, because this way, then I can at least get information out, versus sometimes you'll interview people and it's like you have to draw it out of them, and that's
Oh
no
yeah.
fun for anybody.
Yeah, no. I was just really like, the thing that kept coming up as you were sharing that was the patchworkness of it, and how you really do have to approach a writing career. And this has come up over and over, and I've definitely seen it in my work, is that it's not going to be one monolithic end all be all. This is your book deal. There are so many
Yeah.
things that you have to have your hands in, and stuff to carry you over till the next thing, and to be diverse and versatile and flexible. Definitely stretched you in all of those, like with all of that happening, and so many dashed
Oh
hopes
yeah.
and the disappointments. And I was like, I was just aching. I was, when you were sharing, I was like,
It was
no.
it was constant. And then, just to add to that, it's a good thing I went through that. And you know, I think too, with women especially, there is something about like growing up, like even though I'm so the same person as I was in the 80s, and with my personality, but
Mhm.
like now I'm able to be a little bit more resilient and more like if you were to bounce a coin off of something. Because when that happened in Los Angeles, I mean, I made the best of it, but I was alone in Los Angeles, which was not like New York. Like New York, you never feel alone, because first of all, it was closer to where I was from on the East Coast. But
Mhm.
second, you can jump on the subway. Los Angeles, you're stranded. Like you're in this inverted suburb, and I didn't know anybody. And now all of a sudden, work has gone. Like my dreams are gone. What do I do? Well, 2020 has been an interesting inversion of that, because now I have all these people interested, and like I'm going to direct a project. We're all set, and now it's COVID, and it's like filming in COVID. Like now people ask me, oh, aren't people filming again? Well, kind of, but you have to have money, because someone has to be in charge of people getting tested twice a week, sometimes three. um, and I would rather wait,
Mhm.
because it's my first time being able to greenlight something that I wrote. And I would rather do it when there's less complications. But I've learned to be more resilient. It's like, okay, Alycia, is the world going to end if you can't film in January and you have to film in May? Not really. It
Mhm.
feels like it, but it's not. So I feel writers have to be able to sort of look at things like that and say, okay, that's not going to happen. What can I do in the meantime? Because it's a nerve-wracking career in any way.
So you mentioned something that you're doing now with scripts that you didn't know
Mhm.
how to do 4 years ago. What is that thing?
Okay, I always wanted to be a film writer, But where I got kind of caught up, Tia, is I felt I had, number one, I had imposter syndrome for a very long time in my adult life that I feel I'm just getting rid of now.
Hmm.
I didn't know if I knew how to do a script. I knew that I was film obsessive. I knew I was a great writer, and I knew that my work was more cinematic than just like books. Like I was more of a movie person. But I got caught up because I was in education for so long that I felt, well, I was in a program for books, so I know I can do it. I'm an actor. I was in this great school. I know I can do it. I know I could write for magazines. But because I wasn't in like Tisch at NYU, I was in the other program. I didn't I didn't know if I knew exactly what to do, and I was always afraid, and I always kind of held myself back like, "Oh, you'll figure it out, or someone will show you later." So what ended up happening was I just knew it was the time. How I started really screenwriting was I worked at a film festival doing PR and doing all the red carpet events. So I was interviewing everybody. I took that opportunity for myself to literally befriend every single person I could, getting emails, getting a chance to talk to them, going out for coffee while they were in town. Um, and so how this happened for me was all the time I took making contacts in any place I had been. I left Los Angeles and now have more contacts than I did when I was there. Um, and I became friends with people who were producers, and I started asking them questions about what is the process like. What is the process with indie movies versus a huge big budget movie? Because as a writer, you need to know, like, where does the money need to come in order for this to get moving? Who gets it when? And what I realized, and this is so sad that at 40 years old this occurred to me, I was meant to be a director the whole time, because a lot of writers, you see it in your head, you know how you want it to be. It's like, well, why wouldn't I direct that? But again, imposter syndrome. I
Hmm.
don't know how to film. I'm not a cinematographer. I didn't go to school for that. So I started befriending cinematographers. And I read an interview with Sofia Coppola where she just was like, you don't have to know how to do it. A director and a writer, like the writer director combo, you don't have to know how to do everything. You hire people that know how to do that. So that kind of opened a door for me. And then the second step was I looked at my contacts, asked producers questions. The third major thing was I have a friend who is a screenwriter for big projects. And I think I one day just broke down and said to him, I have these ideas, but what do I put it into? I was that ridiculous where I knew I could do it, but I didn't. Everything with me is always about technology. Oh, I barely know how to do PowerPoint. How am I going to do this? He told me about Fade In,
Mm.
and I think I got it as a gift. I think my mother bought it for me. I got a Fade In subscription to Screenwrite, and immediately within probably 10 minutes, I knew that's what I was meant to do for the rest of my life.
Oh.
That program
Hmm.
teaches you, if you mess around with it a little bit, it teaches you about, it'll just prompt you. Do you want like to cut there? Oh yeah, I do. Do I want to dissolve? Yeah, I do. And the reason I say this was like a door opening was books are really effing hard. We
Mm.
all know it. They're time and it really time intensive, and there is absolutely no short-term goal, like gain from it, because nobody gets to read it for years. And that was hard for me, to have no like getting feedback and excitement. So the thing is, when you're writing the script, you're getting so much immediacy to it because it's in script form.
Hmm.
And I just literally, Tia, I started making calls right when like probably 2 months before COVID, I called Telefilm Canada and I said, I want to be the next Nick Pizzolatto, and I'm a female. And if there's been any time to be a female screenwriter, it's right now. I said, I have an 8 limited edition, limited series that I want to write, and I would like to be in. I'll screen test for it, but would you guys be willing to do this? And they're wonderful, because in Canada, their government gives a lot of production value to this versus in America, we go to like independent investors.
Hmm.
These people have been fantastic. So I sent them the pilot and another episode. And of course, COVID hit. So I couldn't go up there. I had to like location scout, but we actually have stuff moving. We have things moving.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah, I'm writing the 1-pages for that right now, which is your viewers might enjoy this. Doing a 1-page is like envisioning the promos later. So if it's coming out and you're
Uh-huh.
doing lines and all that stuff, that's the stuff I love to write. but you're doing it to get people involved in your project. So I'm like coming up with taglines so that crews and sound people will be like, oh my God, I want to be involved in that. When is it starting? Who do I call?
Hmm.
So it's I would tell people to get involved. Definitely if you have film festivals in your area, it is an absolutely invaluable thing to get involved with. Um, and then truly think about and take an hour to brainstorm, who do I know, who have I met in my travels that I can ask questions to. And I started saying to myself, what are you afraid of? Like what scares you? And the thing was, is I didn't know an ABCD route to do this,
Hmm.
and that made me very nervous. So once I started asking producers questions, and once you start learning, okay, if you have friends that are actors that have any kind of name, get them involved and say, hey, we're going to do it about this time. Could you commit to it? Once you get names, then you can start getting some money, or you bring in pals. And it started to feel so much less scary. And then I started booming these things out. So I have the show. The show is done. I have a film that I sent to Netflix, because I submitted for this contest, again with contest, and I got feedback on it, and people were like, "This is great. It's a female-led thriller." And then I want to direct. I really want to direct my own writing, and so I wrote this other project, but now I have like 8 different scripts. I had literally nothing. I had nothing last year at this time. So I want to tell people you can do it, but unfortunately, and I know this is hard for women because we put ourselves on a timetable,
Hmm.
you can't predict it. I wish this happened when I was 25, but it wasn't. I needed to learn what I needed to learn, and now people are like, "Wow, your scripts are great, and how are you writing them so quickly?" Well, I can write them quickly because I'm used to writing books that take 3 years.
Right.
So your mind, when you get into scripts and you don't have to deal with any of that added prose, and you don't have to deal with like figuring out chapters and how they're going to be laid out, you're booming. It's all dialogue. So screenwriting, it literally hit me like a lightning bolt. I knew in my heart I was supposed to do it, but my head didn't believe it. It kept saying, you don't know what
Yeah.
you're doing.
I'm so
And
inspired. I'm so like, so across the room, you can't see it. I don't know if you follow my other Instagram account, but I talk about I have a script underway, and that's all fiction. I have a different account for fiction. And
oh, I have to get on it.
yeah, so over there, I have my first board for my first screenplay, and I'm actually writing a novella and the screenplay together. It's a Christmas
Nice.
theme thing. So I was like, because I needed that transition, like I need a because it's about Mrs. Claus. I'm not going to pitch it or anything, but
Nice.
it's got all this feminist mojo. So she's long overdue. But anyway, I was like trying to find my way through screenplays because I keep buying them and studying them, and it's like my
Yeah.
secret dream. My secret dream is to write movies. And same thing, the mental disconnect of your head not believing you can do it. So I was like, okay, so break it down, Tia. You can do a chapter of the book and then a scene of I do the screenplay first and then I flesh it out in the book.
Mhm.
So I'm going to end up with a manuscript and a screenplay at the same time. And if I'm just assuming I have to indie publish everything. I always forget that there's pathways out there
I
where
know.
like I'm so used to having to do everything on my own and like teach myself everything
I
that I
know.
forget. You said ask people you know, and I'm like, I don't even know who I know that knows. Like,
I know.
I don't even think
That's why it
about
takes
that.
time. That's why you have to sit there and kind of almost make a chart and go, okay, this friend of mine, where did they used to work? Would they, even if they can't connect you per se, they
Hmm.
can give you information. Like, it's so valuable to understand. And I'm always willing, if anybody ever wants to contact me to share any of this info, it's just so important to understand the production and how scripts are developed and what it means to go into development. Because
Hmm.
when you know what someone's going to need farther down the line, it makes it easier to write a screenplay. Like if you know you're going to have a smaller budget, then you can already get stuff into your screenplay like, okay, my friend's house would completely work for that. So why don't I write it right in there? Like when you're writing like an action scene or where people are going, make it
Hmm.
easier on yourself. Write it with that place in mind. It helps to think about money and it helps to think about resources when you're writing it. That's what
Yeah, I
I
was
found.
thinking about that with the extended impact of COVID. Screenwriters, like I think we're going to see like almost an after effect of that
Mm.
with small casts and limited locations, and like
A
that
lot
might
of
be a
animation.
yeah, oh yeah, so we'll just have AI actors. It's so sad, but it could happen.
I
Probably
know.
will, just to help. We still need entertainment. We still, like, the world still needs content, and it's chomping for it. And there's so many avenues now. Like, I'm very excited that there's streaming services, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
like places for art that didn't exist before. And there's, fewer, like, I don't want to say fewer gatekeepers, because there's probably more for every platform, but they're hungry. It seems like that's the feeling from far
Oh
away,
yeah.
that they're like it's still a fertile time to get in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not locked
Absolutely.
down yet, is what it. Yeah. Cool. I had another question. We have about 7 minutes. So do you still coach and all of that?
Mm.
That's because, so for a long time I had you in my head just as PR. I didn't know that you were like actually doing
Oh yeah.
content. So,
No, I do. I'm trying to think, like, I do a lot of writing. I always call it PR, because it's like branding people.
mhm,
So I do certain clients. And in fact, over 2020, I started getting a different, this was another thing with not being afraid. I usually have clients that are in the music business, fellow authors. I'll do their LinkedIn's, which people always seem to need help with, or I'll write blogs on behalf of people, which is time consuming for many. Um, so I do things like that. But now I have like some clients that were in like banking, and when I got this, I'm like, oh no, I don't know anything about this. But then I realized, when you're doing someone's like resume, this woman wanted to get this new position. When you're doing a resume and a cover letter, I send clients a questionnaire, because you don't need to research the work. If you do your questionnaire right, they tell you what their job is and what they're trying to do or what their wins have been. You're selling the person. So
mhm,
if I have a day job, it's that I write content for clients. I write blogs. I do their cover, like a portfolio cover letter. So I guess that would fall into PR. But that's like what my working work is
mhm,
while I do these other things. And sometimes it's easy to get clients. I always find like work begets work. Like right when like I want to take a break, then I'll get somebody new.
mhm.
And I grew up without much money, so I'm always like the one that's like, I have to work all the time. Like I have to like take
Right.
everything, because I'm always afraid I won't have anything.
Yeah, my
But
family is so mad right now because I technically got laid off November 5th. And like on November 6th, I got up and started a podcast. And they're like, you work 12, 13-hour days. Why aren't you acting like you're unemployed? I'm like, because I'm not. A writer is always working. Like, it's just our income levels might change. But I mean, I'm sure
yeah.
you're creative enough. Like, just like I call it compulsive creativity. Like, there's no
Oh yeah.
off. There's no off. So we're always
No.
making things. We're always doing. How do you primarily hang your shingle out? What's your avenue to get that work? Is it word of mouth or your
Yeah,
website?
it's probably not as, other people are probably far better again and luckier than me. What I find is, number one, word of mouth. Two, I'll like write kind of engaging, funny posts on LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
where I'm asking for work, but it doesn't look like I'm asking for work. Like I
Yeah.
always do it in kind of a funny way. Um, Something on Indeed popped up. I did get someone on Indeed. Um, for me, I don't tend to get as many like corporate things as you. I probably don't have the same kind of like marketing background, but I do work with one communications firm that I get some work through, and it's for like a sleep doctor, which is really nice. The problem though with writing, and that's something I coach about a lot, is knowing your value financially, like as a freelancer, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of places know that they can't do any of this, but then they want to give you like pennies to do it. And it's like, well, no. And I teach people how to write statements of work and to present it and say, if it's going to be hourly, here's what it is. And then there's some work that cannot be hourly, like you just can't do it like that. So I do coaching, and especially for writers, because there's this tendency that they just want to like grab work. Like, I won't name the place, but I had a recent situation where I was writing a video script. And the problem is when people come at it and say, hey, we pay this much, they don't realize that doing a video script for a 2-hour movie, I can do that in 48 hours. They asked me to do it for my favorite television show, which is a 6-season show, 92 hours of television, finding timestamps, transcribing dialogue, writing all about these intricate things, and like wanted to give this like amount of money. And I, at first I said yes. And then I wrote to the guy and said, listen, you have to understand that this is like 3 times that much amount of work. And so when I do the edits for things that you want, like changed or transcribed, you're getting my hourly rate because this is insane. So I think a lot of times I coach mostly on people knowing their financial value. Time is money. And when people, unfortunately, companies, like, I'll research when they want me to do this stuff and I'm like, wow, you have 2.5 million viewers on YouTube. You have a lot of advertising money. You need to pay your writers. Like,
Mhm.
you have to pay people to put in this much time. So a lot of the coaching I do is about making people understand that, because writers do have a tendency to be like, oh, it's a job. Well, yeah, but you're spending like 20 hours and they're giving you the extent of like 3 hours of work. So it's a good time to be teaching people this so that they get into 2021 with a different mindset.
I want to have a whole nother show just on that. It's a huge topic. It's
It
a huge
is.
topic. Writers get undercut all the time. They don't want to stand up for themselves. We have 60 seconds left, and I'm like, damn it, I want a whole nother show on this.
It's a crazy thing, but and again, no problem if people don't know that. I didn't know it. I learned it
Mhm.
from a female writer myself, and I was one of those like, yes, I'll take anything. And then you start to realize, no,
Yeah.
um, but anything else? I feel like I talked a lot, but I probably didn't hit anything.
Just let's do this again. If I go over 20 episodes, I'll hit you up because right now I'm
Yeah.
capping it at 20, but I've gotten way more topics than 20. So I might have like a second season. They do release every other week, so that takes me into September right now, and I don't love that, like you were saying with timing. Um, but thank you so much,
Yeah.
and
Thanks for
it's so
having me.
good. And we should just do it again. I'm just like getting going. I feel like we just warmed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, definitely. Let me know. I can always do it. I always work from home, always willing to do it.
Okay, awesome. Best of luck to you on everything. And
Oh,
I'll check
thank
in with
you.
you before I do the intro outro to see if we need to update how things are
Yeah.
going in
I
2022.
think
Yeah.
there might be some changes because coming this spring, maybe the border will open and I can go to work.
Go to Canada. So good.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, girl. I'll see you on Instagram.
You shall. Bye.
Bye.